Right, it's such a pleasure and honour to be here today. It feels like a very important thing to be celebrating and honouring young talent and the young innovators. So we do a lot of that at Big Change. We kind of focus and find and fund young people who've got bold ideas to drive change. And today we've got 3 brilliant people joining us to give perspectives. The title of this panel is around what's stopping them. And so we're really kind of zooming back really to look at some of the systemic barriers of what is stopping young people from both coming up with ideas in the first place, getting funding, supporting, and also along their journey. And so having a bit of a kind of step back to then go in. Joining me here, Kieron Boyle, CEO of Impact Investing. Kieron's got a wealth of experience from government, in philanthropy, and also in the impact investing space, and so is going to be sharing with us that kind of the context around the funding landscape and also kind of metrics. Ed Fidoe, a big changer, go ahead, is CEO of London Interdisciplinary School, an amazing university that's really rethinking the model of how we educate young people. Also co-founder of School 21 and actor in Wolf when he was young. He's going to be so cross. So honoured to share that. So thank you, Ed, for joining. And then Raut, who is an extraordinary young founder herself, founder of WUKA, UK's first period pants. So we're going to, in terms of the flow of our session today, we're going to have an opportunity to hear from each of the panelists, just to really set the context on their perspective from those different angles. Then we're going to go into a short kind of panel discussion, sharing some of the ideas about the needs and opportunities for change within the system, and then we're going to open up for a Q&A. So at least half our time today will be audience questions and Q&A, so please feel free to kind of think of questions as we go. I'm going to start with Ed, in terms of just sharing a little bit of that context around the education landscape, how we're setting young people up to be innovators and problem solvers, and the kind of support system around that. So, Ed, if you don't mind.
Thanks, Essie. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure we are, actually. And I think a little known fact or misunderstanding is that if you go back to when my sort of in their 20s and 30s, so in the 80s and 90s, you had lots more entrepreneurs, or certainly lots more business owners than you have today. Because people think we have more entrepreneurialism now, but we actually have a lot less. And part of the reason is, I think you now have these mega companies that are kind of killing all the small business opportunities. So Amazon didn't exist then. So I went to school with a friend whose parents run like a small part of the toy supply chain. But also, my parents and most of my friends' parents didn't go to university. So they were out in the world of work a bit quicker. They didn't have debts. And they're perhaps in a position where they had more space to take some risks. I think there's a few problems with the education system now. One is credentialism. And so the status of having a degree is becoming really, really important, which kind of pushes you towards going to university. And it might seem odd given I've created a university to be thinking maybe not as many people should be going, but certainly I don't think as many people should be going and doing what they're doing currently. Then a second problem is around rules. And we essentially reward you figuring out what the rules are and getting an A in the rules. And entrepreneurialism or innovation is about rethinking the rules, either subverting the rules or even better, just sort of ignoring or trying to come up with a new set of rules. And school gives you no reward for that whatsoever. So at school, at university, higher education beyond that, you are being rewarded for doing well at the rules. And then the final thing I'll say, I think that doesn't work about education, sorry to be so negative, is that when it comes to problems, the school is prescribing you the problem, and this continues at university as well. So it's saying to you, this is the problem, this is the formula sheet, and the answer's in the back of the book. And there's a right and a wrong answer, typically. Not always, but typically. And what that means is that when you're then spat out either into the world of work or into trying to start your own thing, you're sort of waiting to be told what the problem is, whereas entrepreneurialism is in some senses about finding a problem and then working really hard to tackle that problem. And so I think problem discovery on your own is a really important thing, which school can help with. I mean, not to plug LIS, but that's what we do. From the first year, students are trying to define their own problem that they want to work on. So I think education needs to shift more in that direction.
Yeah, I love it. It's both kind of a little bit negative, but also optimistic in terms of the fact that actually your journey through education doesn't define whether or not you're going to be a good entrepreneur or not, because it's a different set of skills. Hopefully, education will catch up, but I see the optimism in it.
Let's see, yeah.
So, Kieron, just coming to you in terms of your journey and some observations about the kind of, I suppose, that demand side, the kind of the support that's out there or not for young people.
Brilliant. Well, firstly, I just want to say how exciting it is to be here today, and well done to everyone for two reasons. Firstly, you've chosen to care about stuff, and lots of people don't. And secondly, you've chosen to do something about it, and even fewer people are there. So thank you for that. And I've also just realised, because I can see myself on a screen, that I'm talking to young innovators, and I've dressed up like my grandfather. So.
At least your socks don't match the chairs. That's really embarrassing.
Yeah. Green screen them. But I was asked to share a few thoughts on pounds and impact. And the first thing I would say is that across the funding picture, and I've worked in government, I've worked in business, I've worked in philanthropy. Actually, there's a very small link between pounds and impact. You know, the funding you get, the financing you get, and the impact you're having in the world. There's not much evidence to show that the two are connected. They ought to be. We all know that they ought to be, but for lots of reasons, they're not. So I would always say to entrepreneurs and innovators, don't get too fussed by that. I think Victoria put it really nicely and said, don't really respond to the thing that you think you ought to do. Just do the thing that you're setting out to do. And of all the successful entrepreneurs that I've seen, really get to your question, Ed, they're just very clear about the problem that they're trying to solve. And that actually turns out to be a really effective way of engaging different types of funding. They're clear about the problem they're trying to solve. That helps them be clear about the solution that they're aiming for, the scale it needs, the sustainability that will sit behind it. But there are different types of funding out there, and they take on different forms as well. And there's probably a pretty fun game that we can play, because the three big pots of money out there are firstly philanthropy, if you're trying to get things done. And I think we're going to talk about scale businesses today, but not every impactful issue needs great scale to it. I think it's important to say, but lots do. So there's philanthropy, and that's good for lots of stuff. There's government, and then there's a lot of business and capital markets behind it. But the scale between these things is quite different. So I wonder if actually, three people in the front row, could you just stand up? Thank you. So you are going to represent philanthropy just here in the UK. That's the scale of philanthropy at the moment. Could everybody in these two sets stand up? Sorry, stay standing up. Yep, and here as well, please. I realise this isn't very good for the camera, but anyway. Okay, so you are representing government and philanthropy in the UK. Can everybody else stand up? That's not even half the scale of commercial and investment activity in the UK at the moment. You can all sit down. But it gives you a sense that there are actually very different scales and sizes between these types of funding, and that can become very important depending on what you're trying to do. But there are different tendencies and different mandates to those types of money. And it's that mandate point that I'll finish on, which is every type of funder, every type of financing will have a different reason behind it, why it does what it does. It might not always do what you want it to do, but that's a very difficult thing to shift at times. So for the entrepreneurs out there, what I've seen is the most successful entrepreneurs have been able to say both, what is the problem I'm trying to solve, but why is it your problem as well? And why is the thing that I'm doing solving what you've been set up to do? And that is often, I think, one of the best routes into attracting funding or financing from any of those different sources.
Love it, thank you. And that was a really helpful. It's so helpful to kind of have a visualization of the actual market. So I really appreciate that. Ruby, love to hear from you a little bit in terms of both your journey and experience as a young innovator yourself and how you've navigated context, any lessons that you've taken from that.
Thank you. By the way, Victoria was like the ideal entrepreneur you would see anywhere, and very much I've got the similar path and journey. Slightly, a little bit different is more on the where I grew up and where I was born. So I grew up in Nepal, and at the age of 12, I had my first period. My first period, my mum gave me her oldest sari, cotton, cut into small pieces, and told me that I have to go and stay at my aunt's house, because I was untouchable. And this happens to majority of the Asian girls in Nepal, in India, in Bangladesh, Pakistan, and in African countries as well, where girls and women are often banished for having period. And I think my experience was very much of what shaped me to stand here and talk to you about and start the business. The cotton sari were very sustainable because obviously often passed from my mum to me and then used for the rest of my life, but they were quite uncomfortable. And often when I went to school, the pad used to literally fall off on the toilet and I had to literally pick it up, go back home. And this was the story of thousands and thousands of girls in the same school. Slowly we stopped going to school. And one of the things I think entrepreneurial thing is something that I think you have it in you since when you are young. And as you grow older, you'll start finding like, oh, actually, you know what, I used to do that kind of thing. And one of the things I used to do was like, I started with safety pinning the pad in the underwear. Obviously realized that it was dangerous. Then I started wearing multi-layer underwear. And that actually is the thing that I created. I moved to UK when I was 20 years old to only find that there was so much choices in the supermarket, but it was when I did environmental science through Open University, my life completely changed. I went to every shop to only find that pretty much everything that you can find there have got some kind of plastic in them, including your period product. So I did actually, as a part of my entrepreneurial journey, I did a hackathon. And these are like the lean startup machine that they used to call it. A weekend program where pretty much you go with an idea, pitch it to your friends, anyone in there who love your idea will form a group, and within a weekend you start a business. And I think that is such a nice part in my career that really shaped me of how I do things. And took the idea and I went to start teaching to young girls everywhere in school about like sustainable period products, sustainable food waste program, those kind of thing. And came back home one day thinking like, somebody's got to do something about this. And at that time, actually, I didn't realize that how much taboo was period in this country as well. It's one of the most hidden subject. Nobody talks about it. A woman will spend almost 9 years to actually get diagnosed with endometriosis or PCOS. So it's much of a health challenge than a sustainable one. But my focus was very much sustainable and took the idea, put it up in Kickstarter, raised £7,000. And my journey has been bootstrapped all the way till here. 5-6 years in, we did 17 million turnover so far. And you can do it without even any funding. And this is my journey so far.
Amazing, and such an inspiring story. I think that identifying the problem, I mean, that's such a key theme. Just want to kind of step back, not dwell on the negative, but look at the realities facing young innovators today, and really kind of interested to hear from each of you about what you see as the biggest challenge that's facing young innovators, people who want to set something up or to be an entrepreneur. What do you think the biggest challenge? And if you want to say it in the same sentence, what piece of advice would you have around navigating that? Who's ready? Yeah,
I can go. I mean, I think time and money are really important, and I actually think status is something which is important as well. And I think social media, not to be like an old bloke complaining about social media, but I think it's both good and bad in this. So I think there is now a coolness and a status to being a founder, an entrepreneur. It's a label which just didn't exist in 2000 when I was leaving university. But if social media had been around in 2000 when I was leaving university, after a year of living in Brixton, I basically ran out of kind of options and just went home and lived with my parents in the East Midlands. And if my friends had been posting like on Instagram, them being in Turkey and me like throwing a basketball against my parents' house in the East Midlands, like no money, no sex, like paler than I am now, that you know, I wouldn't have got many likes. But I mean, there was pressure. But there was pressure. Like, what you like? Occasionally, I was speaking to them on the landline. Like, they'd be like, "What are you doing?" You know, and I'd say, "It's fine. It's cool up here. Don't worry, I'll be back." Because I was trying to do stuff in theatre then, right? And it didn't end up working out anyway. But I think now social media, there'd be that pressure to kind of be showing. And Victoria talked about it, the sort of speed. And the reality is, it takes a long time. And actually, the harder thing, I think, when you're 21, 22. those first 3 years, they just feel like you have to land it in like 2 or 3 years because you're in this race with your friends to be successful. And I get it, and I've been there as well, and that's very difficult. So I think, and social media, I think, means it's like you've got to show you're making progress every day, every week. So that's very difficult. But I think one of the positives, though, is around money, might be that employers seem open to flexible working arrangements now, maybe post-COVID, maybe it's just because of modern living. And so the idea of, we're seeing some of the graduates from LIS are starting to look at already a sort of portfolio of things, and that just definitely wasn't a thing even 10 years ago, I'd say.
Yeah, love it, and thank you. Kieron or Ruby?
I think I would say you don't always have to start a business to be an entrepreneur. You can always join other entrepreneurs in the same kind of journey. Because like Victoria said, you know, like you need a go-getter in a startup kind of machine, a startup kind of world. Because you will learn pretty much everything, and almost take that as your training step, and then try and look for those kind of places where you can actually learn to be an entrepreneur and get that 360 degree of how to run a business before actually going. And then in that process you can learn. And there is like I think good website called jumpstart.co.uk where you can pitch to work in a startup kind of way if you are really into like that kind of mindset of like, I want to do something, but I want to learn kind of way. So there are opportunities out there that you can go for it. And yeah, definitely. If I were to go back and do things, I would definitely work in a startup, because once you are in, you get everything. You know everything from logistics to delivery to like how content works to finance, and pretty much in my team, I think everybody knows everybody's job if one person is away. So that's
I love that. And it relates a bit to what Victoria was saying about you're not an expert at the start, you just have to start by doing. And so actually that challenge is like knowing where to start, but just getting experience. And I know that Ruby, with your journey, you just were volunteering for different projects and you learnt by kind of having opportunities.
Yeah, I at one point I was volunteering in 5 different places just to see how thing operates. I never got a job. I never had a desk job before even starting WUKA. So for me, it was just learning how meetings are done or how organizing is created, those kind of things. So that was a really great exposure for me.
Yeah, brilliant.
You can be entrepreneurial in lots of places as well. So there's being the entrepreneur. There's definitely, if we just think about impact in the world, just being entrepreneurial in platforms that you have. So like, I spent 10 years working in government. There's definitely a place where there's a space for people to come in and just do things very, very, very differently. I mean, I can only base this on personal experience, but as I think about what's in the plus camp for young innovators today, is a sense that I think it's a perfectly acceptable, important, good thing to be an entrepreneur, to set something up, to go for it, to try for it. And that might be different than it was 20, 30 years ago, where I didn't necessarily have that sort of social cachet to it as well. So that's definitely in its favour. But I think the big problem that I see at the moment is that a lot of the decision-making apparatus that's been set up to get money to entrepreneurs is still quite old world. And the models that we've heard about today are models of the access economy. They're models of seeing great commercial opportunity in places that people have just overlooked because they thought it just didn't really matter or they didn't know it. And that's much more new economy. That's much more new power. And so I think really that's partly why kind of a call to, yes, be an entrepreneur, yes, set up great businesses, but get yourself into philanthropy, get yourself into government, get into those roles where you can shape the funding and financing environment too.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, reflecting on kind of what Ed was saying in terms of people, the education system not necessarily setting young people up, actually having on your CV that you tried something or volunteering or part of something which built that entrepreneurial mindset actually gives you kind of credit on your CV, even whether it worked or not. So leading on this kind of bit of hope in terms of the future, what are some of the trends that you see or kind of shifts that you're starting to see, either in the kind of the funding market or organisations thinking differently about how we're setting young people up or supporting differently? A
few. I'm allowed to do big picture now. I can do big picture. A few. I mean, the first thing, let's go through all of those those different fields that I spoke about before. So first thing, kind of capital markets, so where all the world's money is. There's definitely a very structural thing going on, which is that really big pots of money are starting to think much harder about their externalities on the world, their environmental externalities, their social externalities. Not for any ethical or normative reason, but just because they're seeing that if you want to make money over the longer term, you need to think about this sort of thing. That is profoundly important for people who are setting up businesses that are often responding to the fact that those externalities have been undervalued, which is a lot of the people in this room. Secondly, governments are slowly around the world, but are getting much more thoughtful about ways in when should government itself be the service provider? When is the role of government to kind of take money from citizens and then do something with it? And when is it the role of government to, to take money from citizens, but then kind of create a platform for other people to deliver within it who might not be the government at all? And there are lots of outcomes-based models that are emerging around the world that give great opportunities for entrepreneurs too. And then finally, in philanthropy, perhaps one of the biggest shifts you're seeing is people just thinking much harder about who's sitting around the table taking decisions around where big pots of money should be allocated over the longer term. And if you to look around most philanthropies in the world, the people running them aren't young. Actually, they're not lots of things as well in terms of diversity. But that's starting to shift as well. So all of those, I think, should give great cause for confidence that it is shifting, perhaps slower than people in this room would like. But you're all entrepreneurs, so you want everything to be fast anyway.
Ruby, is there anyone or anything giving you hope?
Funding-wise, talking about funding, obviously we've been bootstrapped so far, and at the moment, actually, we are looking for investment, and the whole journey that in the last 3 months it's been quite interesting. A, you're a female. B, you're a person of color. C, you are looking for funding in a sector that is very difficult because there are like big conglomerate like P&Gs and the Unilevers will just come and, take the share of the market. But I think where we have been challenged is like we are a sustainable brand, impact-making brand. Pretty much every underwear that we sell replaces 200 pads and tampons going to landfill. It has got 5 times less carbon footprint. But we are a degrowth brand. See, if we grow in a massive scale kind of way, we will degrowth the economy around period product, almost more than half, right? And that is not where all the VC money they want to put their money in. So it has been quite challenging to find the right investor, I would say, who really understands the impact of the product and how it impacts on people living all around the world. Saying that, there's always this like small cohort now and then you find, and then we are at the moment talking to them. But it is challenging, especially for I think impact brand who are trying to convince that, and also if you are trying to slow down the economy, because I feel that that's the only way that we can live sustainably is if we slow down the consumerism. So it's slightly bleak, but I'm hopeful, and I see more and more when we talk to the investor, they really get it, what we are trying to achieve. So it's just like that convincing tipping point is, I think, necessary.
I feel like that builds on what Victoria was saying about that kind of finding the right marriage. Yeah. People who are genuinely aligned to your outcomes, not just you aligning to their outcomes. It feels like such an important message.
And money is tempting, right?
Money is
when you want to grow, kind of
growth is tempting, but it's not always.
But you have to find somebody that aligns with the value.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to double down on attitudes from employers actually, because I know I've sort of been where you're sitting, and money's really important, and especially if your friends are going off and making good money. I think there's 2 examples that we've had in the last 12 months at LIS of two young people joining us who are kind of interested, they've worked for startups and they're interested in starting things themselves. So one was a young woman, she was about 25 when she first worked for us about 18 months ago, and she worked for us for 6 months, and she was completely brilliant. And then she called me into a room and said, really sorry, I've decided I've met a co-founder and we're going to go off and start a business. And I was pretty gutted, but I said, best of luck, that's really exciting. And then within about 9 months, it had failed. She'd lost, spent the money that she'd raised. And I got back in touch with her and said, do you want another job? And she was like, yeah, cool. And she came back, and she's back with us now, and she's been with us for nearly a year, and she's completely brilliant. And so kudos for her for kind of swallowing her pride, coming back, saying, well, I left, I said I was going to start a new business. But also, she's back now with a kind of new plan. She's learnt a lot. I've got lots of benefits of what she's learned. I'm now kind of capitalizing on that. So people see the idea that you try and start a business and fail. You can see what you've learned from it rather than it's a black mark. The second example is another guy similar age he'd done all the kind of prestigious degrees and stuff, but then he'd worked for two big companies, startups though, I guess, Uber, counted as a startup, and something called On Deck. And he'd been fired from both of them, as in made redundant from both of them, in big staff cuts. So it wasn't because he'd done something inappropriate. But still, he was like very open. Yeah, worked for Uber for 18 months, got fired. Worked for On Deck for 18 months, got fired. And was just very relaxed and quite confident in that, and said this is why it happened. Of course, you need to kind of check there's something else going on. There wasn't. They just made these big cuts. And again, employers are sort of very willing to look at these kind of imperfect CVs and see past it and think, well, the experiences of having been through this, and he survived previously 2 or 3 big cuts, that's an experience in itself. Then you get cut and you think it's the end of the world, and it's not the end of the world. So don't try to start off, and you'll see lots of your friends try and build this perfect CV, and it's not like don't care about your CV, but care about your learning and your experiences. And I hope other employers also are kind of really open to this now.
I love that. It's such a good way to kind of end this part of it. Is just that constant learning by doing. Just get out there, do it, learn. So we're going to open up for questions from the audience now. Let's see how many hands go up, and then I'll see whether we take them one at a time or a cluster. Anybody? Yeah.
Hi, thank you for your time. Firstly, really, I love you. Your work is amazing. But this is a question for everyone. And Ed, you spoke to sort of the incentive structures in academia. To what extent, or where do you see this going well? I don't know where the students from LIS come from, but is there a country or a culture where you see that risk averseness doesn't occur? Like I had a very small experience in California when I was younger, and there were fuck-up Friday nights where you were celebrated for failing, and that inspired me to start my startup. It was not the very strict Catholic upbringing that I got in London, so it was like a completely different culture, but also not to romanticize the US. Is there a culture that you see that does celebrate that? And yeah.
I haven't. There may be some, and that's a good example of them. I think part of the problem is the world, on the whole, the world still looks to the UK and to some extent the US for what great education should be and what higher education so they're trying to kind of copy that on the whole. So you've seen lots of business schools and universities crop up in other parts of the world now, but they are, in my view, too similar to the models that we've seen that are essentially kind of the blueprints were created 1,000 years ago. So there's lots of small examples of insurgent institutions that may be rewarding and actually admitting on different bases. We have a different sort of admissions at LIS, for example. But no, I think it's a big problem, and I kind of hope it's like the property bubble, which in the end somebody checked all the mortgage contracts and went, these mortgage contracts are worthless, and that bubble implodes and it resets.
In academia?
I just hope, at some point, like maybe all these degrees, it's like you got to get a master's now because everyone's got a master's, maybe everyone's got to have a PhD. At some point, it all falls in on itself because everyone goes, you're not learning what you need to learn in these things, right? It doesn't make any sense. I don't see any signs of that yet, but that's what I'm hoping happens.
I think it's interesting, the culture question as well, in terms of the normal culture in society around what's valued, what's normal, and actually examples like LIS, African Leadership University, ones that are just showing that actually higher education can be different around problems, around learning what you need to solve things. So that feels like you're doing your work to help shift some of those mindsets.
It's too small. It's just too small. We're still the cutesy little thing that's trying something different on the side. That's the problem.
Yeah, carry on shouting about it. Are there any other questions from... Perfect.
Hi, so I just wanted to ask a question to Ed, which is about basically education. So, how do you see education changing in the sense of like, do you think there's more of a market for like things like experiential learning and just different ways of learning, especially since you're in this space anyways, but like how from like leading this school, like how are you seeing the market change, like, and what sort of like education products can be really like opened up?
Well, I think if we have a change of government in 6 weeks, I think you could start to see some major changes. So what we've had since 2010 is, for I think 12 or 13 of the 14 years, it was the same schools minister, a guy called Nick Gibb, who was a very small c conservative, as well as being literally a conservative, who had, you know, some things, some ideas were good, but mostly he was very driven by a very old-fashioned view of what education should be. Now, I think young people need to learn how to read and write. That's really, really important, and do maths, and too few can. So this is not about chucking all that away. But it's swung way too far to an extreme of kind of traditional metrics and worrying about exam results. I genuinely am hopeful that if they're bold enough, that a new administration can start to open that up a little bit, and so encourage different and provide funding for, which is a big part of this, and perhaps look at the inspectorate at Ofsted and how that might operate in a different way. They may even remove it. I think you need something to inspect schools. But the big levers are, how do you judge schools in terms of exams, and how do you judge schools in terms of the inspectorate? Because head teachers are terrified of Ofsted, because that's essentially how they lose their job if they get a bad rating. And the school that I co-founded got a bad rating 2 or 3 years last year, and we fired the head teacher. So you know, that is how it's kind of how it operates. Now, if the inspectorate is looking for something different, that could create a big shift. The other thing is that if universities started to look for something different, then the entire education system would change, because the entire education system is obsessed with getting people into university. So that's part of what we're doing in our small way. That I don't see moving, but the government may well start to do some big changes.
And do you think it'll still be because I guess you're getting a very kind of institution-based answer there. Could it be very different models where it's very much more self-directed by what's available globally, that's informed by new AI, that I don't really know what I'm talking about, but I hear a lot in that space. So,
yeah. No, I mean, I think I think the school will endure. Schools have been around for hundreds of years. I think schools will endure, and I think they're good things, because they're social places where, you know, there's the childcare aspect of it, but they're also social places where people learn together. I think you could use the fact that you're together with other people more. It's such an individualistic thing. But yeah, I mean, look, how people learn now, and how if I find this in the students at LS, they've got this kind of infinite library in their pocket or whatever, or at home, and you know, that is an extraordinary tool. So I think people are probably learning at least as much at home in those ways, and that should be a leveler, because it used to be that only if you're at quite a wealthy background in a home with lots of books that you had that advantage. Now most people have an electronic device with access to the internet, so that's a positive.
Yeah, so the change can come from multiple places. Now, we're running out of time, so I'm going to, if anybody else has questions, we are going to be around. I think we're going to a break soon. I'm afraid we're going to have to keep them to the break, because we've got 1 minute, and I know that they were very precise timings. So I'm just going to ask really a kind of question to, or one piece of advice to the investors and those that are supporting the young innovators. Like, what do they need to do differently to better support the young innovators coming up? So just if you've got, you don't have to have one, if you've got any kind of clear thing that you want to say to those in the room who are going to be supporting these young investors, just a short one.
To the investors, I would say we need more funding for female founders. That's definitely for sure. Because if you don't see the wealth on the top, that does not trickle down. So that's my one thing.
Smaller sums of money with no strings attached, and we're not going to interfere, and just kind of go, try a thing, and let's see if it works.
Yeah, more trust. Yeah, love it.
The world is going through the biggest change since the Industrial Revolution, right? And there are people there coming up with models, business models that are designed for the economy as it's going to be, not the one of the past century. So getting behind them seems pretty sensible investing to me.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. As I say, sorry that we didn't have longer. If anyone wants to find any of us, so we'll be around at the break. Thank you.
Thank you.